Hello and welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Jane Gogodus. This week, the dead and neglected dams of Blantyre.
This place was made to be a haven for recreation in Blantyre. Back in the days, it was beautiful. Birds were all over drinking from the dam.
In surviving TB in prisons, we zero in at the problem of tuberculosis in the country's jails and what is being done or should be done to contain the disease behind bars. In the arts, we meet singer-songwriter Anita Denga, who says is determined to wear the big shoes left by such greats as Maria Chidzanjankoma. Has she got what it takes? Well, thanks for joining us, and once again, a warm welcome. Now, Chimwankunda and Chiwembe dams in the city of Blantyre are in a very bad state. The dams that once upon a time were the hive of activity and used to add beauty to the two townships are now an eyesore with overgrown weeds, and speak of a sad story of abandonment and neglect, and are a life threat to residents around. This report by Bernard Kankono.
If you can take it from here, we had a gate here, we had a barbed wire from here up to Southeast. Right at the corner of Southeast there was a barbed wire which covered all this area up to there. And then the same barbed wire entered to the main road. Same barbed wire was covered up to somewhere there at Southeast.
Twaba Bison Chreaa, a Chimwankunda-born resident in his 40s, vividly remembers how fascinating Chimwankunda Dam used to be a decade ago. He was just 10 years old when the dam was released. Chimwankunda and Chiwembe dams were among the first dams to be built in the city of Blantyre solely for recreational purposes. The dams were to complement the urbanization demands the commercial city was sailing through soon after Malawi got its independence. Additionally, the two dams used to supplement water supply to the city residents in terms of intermediate water supply from the city's water board. According to one village head, Zingwangwa, back in the days, Chimwankunda Dam used to play a vital role of spicing up the Independence Day celebrations during the era of former President of Malawi, the late Dr. Hastings Kamuzubanda.
This place was made to be a haven for recreation in Blantyre. Back in the days, it was beautiful. Birds were all over drinking from the dam. On the far end, on top of Soji Hill, there was a trademark written "Long Live Kamodzo." It was a protected place. Chimwankunda Dam was there to decorate that trademark.
In recent times, one thing that best describes both Chimwankunda and Chiwembe dams is that the two dams have completely been abandoned. Ruins of what used to be recreation structures in both dams are visible everywhere. Moving around Chimwankunda Dam, the presence of overgrown water hyacinth, commonly known as Anamaspuni, is far and wide. They have swallowed up the dam. Some years back, there were attempts to clean the dam of Namaspuni through a massive project. A few million kwachas were spent, but to no success. Just some 11 kilometers away from Chimwankunda Dam, what used to be an entertainment center in Chiwembe with cruising boats around it has now been turned into farmland. Swamps within the forsaken dam are now a breeding ground for mosquitoes. The residents have now shared the dam, creating small portions of dambos where different crops are being grown. Amos Beni is a former security guard for Blantyre City Council, and he now farms within the dam. He was among those that would be assigned to guard Chiwembe Dam back in the year 2005.
No malo akamaka chire ni malo oti kutsuma kauchuka kwambiri
Mismanagement of this dam has made it a harbor for mosquitoes. In recent times, we have been battling with malaria. It is our appeal to authorities to consider distributing mosquito nets to residents near the dam.
During the time when the two dams were being built, Blantyre City Council and Malawi Housing Corporation were the responsible parties to manage the dams. With the passage of time, the two entities have been denying responsibility, each saying the role to manage the facilities belong to other. In other words, the dams belong neither to the council nor to Malawi Housing Corporation. Reginald Mumba of Coordination Union of Rehabilitation of Environment Chreaa attests that the two dams cannot be forsaken like that, as they have always played a vital role in balancing the ecosystem.
It is very unfortunate that we're having such a situation that they are being silted up and they are being neglected. I would suggest to the Blantyre City, propose that if they cannot manage them, it is better to go into private, private-public partnership arrangement, that some organizations can actually manage them. But otherwise, leaving them like that, I think it is not good. Let's also reflect on what our forefathers and mothers did. I think if we just leave things like that and neglect them, I think we're not responsible.
United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF recognizes Blantyre City as a child-friendly city where young people's rights, including health and recreation, should be fulfilled. Facilities like the two dams fulfill such a child-friendly drive. Perhaps it is not too late to rethink and strategize on the need to revive the dead and forgotten dams of Chiwembe and Chimankunda. In the meantime, residents living around these dams will continue battling malaria due to the swamps that have been created with the deserted dams, and they are now the breeding grounds for malaria.
Tuberculosis is one of the major health burdens worldwide. According to the figures by the World Health Organization, WHO, every year 10 million people fall ill with TB, and that despite being a preventable and curable disease, the disease kills 1.5 million people each year, making it the world's top infectious killer. TB generally thrives in overcrowded and unventilated places, which makes prisons, well, as in the case of Malawi, ideal for its transmission.
Welcome to Maula, one of the most overcrowded prisons in Malawi. It was built in the 1960s to house 800 prisoners, but now holds almost 2,000 of them, more than twice its official capacity. In here are prisoners with TB sharing their space with other inmates. For those having the disease, managing it is very difficult. In fact, having it whilst in prison is but a worst nightmare. This is Wilfred Njoka, who is serving a 14-year jail term for aggravated robbery. Njoka, who has 6 more years to his sentence, contracted TB while in prison.
It is the first time I have had TB. In fact, I got it in here. I was having general body pains, especially along the chest. I then decided to go for a diagnosis and was eventually found with TB. I could not easily associate with some inmates. They feared I would infect them, as such they distanced themselves away from me.
Justino Kalisira, who is serving a sentence for trading in pangolin, an endangered animal species, was also diagnosed with TB whilst in prison in November 2021.
potengera kuti kunoku ndi kundende zinthu zake ndizovuta. When I learned that I had tested positive for TB, I was terribly worried because I knew that in here I would not get the best of care. As in every group, there were those that were supportive. They encouraged me not to lose hope, encouraged me to be positive and ensure that I do not skip my medication. But at the same time, there were those who made fun of my condition, those that kept mocking me, saying with the disease I was good as dead, that I would die of TB, further stressing and heightening my fears.
Across the country's prisons, these are familiar stories. And if they're anything to go by, then the prison system in Malawi is not designed to manage or contain TB, or indeed any other airborne disease. Due to space limitations and an increase in crime rate, most of our prisons are heavily congested, with some jails holding 3 times their intended capacity. According to the Prison Inspectorate report for 2020, there are over 14,000 inmates nationwide. In fact, the prison population stands at 260% of its official capacity, with 14,775 prisoners occupying spaces built for only 5,680. Such overcrowding makes the prisons very fertile grounds for TB infection.
TB, as we have noted as an inspectorate, that TB has become quite a serious issue in our prisons, and that there is a need to urgently address the gaps in how we treat the inmates that have been found with TB. We do acknowledge that so far there have been some good strides that have been taken by the prison service in terms of the screenings that are done in the prisons. You have got at least screenings that are done twice a year. But the problem or the gap that we have seen is that once people have been found to have TB, there are gaps in terms of how they are supposed to be housed within the prisons. I mean that people are supposed to be isolated. Because in most of our prisons we find that there are limited number of spaces. Most of the prisons are congested. So to isolate people that have with TB becomes quite a challenge.
Most, if not all, of the country's prisons have limited, congested spaces. There are no isolation cells, which means those with TB are made to share their spaces with other inmates, a development that further fuels the disease in prisons.
In most of our prisons we find that there are limited number of spaces. Most of the prisons are congested. So to isolate people that have with TB becomes quite a challenge.
We are so overcrowded in here. There are times 100 plus of us are packed in one cell, and it's scaring considering that TB is airborne and thrives in such conditions. It's easy to infect one another. So you can imagine how much of a risk one with TB is to the other inmates.
The inhumane conditions in prisons speak nothing but a prison system that infringes upon the constitutional rights of all inmates.
Our conditions in prison are the worst. And even the United Nations, they have what are called minimum standard rules of prisons, at least the minimum that prisons have to be. So they look at all those issues to say at least a person should be able to have a place to sleep, a person should be able to have in a place that's well ventilated, a person should have access to proper nutrition, proper health, a person should not be tortured, all those issues. But as I've said, our prisons are the complete opposite.
One other glaring gap in managing tuberculosis in prison is the lack of proper diet and nutrition. Due to budgetary constraints, prisoners are fed just once a day. And for a person on TB medication, low food intake compromises their recovery process and increases the risk of tuberculosis for those with malnutrition and micronutrients deficiencies.
Those we receive in here aren't good enough. A person on TB medication requires nutritious food to recover properly. The medication is too strong and it requires one to eat regularly. But that is not the case here. We have one meal only per day.
I usually take my TB medication in the morning before having our daily meal. You may wish to know that the TB drugs are many and the dosage is just too strong on an empty stomach. There were times I took the drugs and felt very weak and dizzy. I would feel so sleepy and too weak to do anything, be it washing my clothes or merely taking a walk. I just didn't have the energy to.
Unfortunately, our prisoners are only given one meal, which is not enough. And to make matters worse, this one meal that they get does not encompass all the nutritional requirements that one needs to have. So there is need for government to actually find a way of pumping in more resources to ensure that these prisoners, at least they do get to have the minimum standard of nutritional value that a person is supposed to have per day.
To effectively contain the spread of TB in prisons, there is serious and urgent need to address prison congestion, among other key issues.
From a human rights perspective, we are not doing too well, and that needs to be addressed, because it's not only about those that are infected with TB that we have to be worried about, but we also have to be worried about those people that these people have to share the living spaces within the prisons, the other inmates. We need to be mindful of also the rights of others. It's the right to health. So, and in terms of the right to health, we need to promote it by making sure that not only caring for those that are infected with TB, but also looking at the welfare of those other inmates who are at risk of contracting TB.
What we want to see is to see that the number of issues are addressed, beginning from congestion, beginning from the resourcing the Malawi prison services, but also concentrating on providing basic necessities for the prison to address the issues of TB.
They can fund us a lot of money or financially so that we can be able to buy some nutritious food to these people who are being found positive with TB. Nutritionally, it's a challenge to cater to those people who have been affected with TB. The other challenge is with human resource. Much that we have got few staff, qualified staffs in our prisons, that sometimes can also help to try to reduce the infection led by early detection of these people who have got signs and symptoms of TB, so that can be screened.
More prisons should be built, but besides that, there are also alternative sentencing, which should be encouraged through the judiciary, so that most of the people that are serving smaller sentences or minor sentences should not go to prison or should not be in prison, but should probably go on other alternatives.
When increasing the space or building the new prisons, government also needs to consider to build or design the prisons in a way that they will be able to contain prisoners, but maybe somehow be able to isolate prisoners. So, for example, if we have prisoners maybe who have an airborne disease, and for some reason, as I've said, these are prisoners that cannot be released, then they have to have maybe a space whereby they will be able to be taken care of. At the same time, the other prisoners will also be able to be protected.
Managing TB in prisons will also require investments in diagnostic and health services, as well as improving on their dietary conditions.
We feel like the government is only concentrating on the outside world for people that are free, but this is a public health issue. The people who are working there, we have warders there, they don't sleep there, they don't put up there.
they sleep outside. So once they get infected there, the issue will come out, but also they will infect the people living outside the prison. So we should all join hands, I think, in addressing these issues. Everyone has a responsibility. All these issues can be addressed only if Malawi Prison Services have resources that aimed at addressing the problems. We want members of parliament to allocate more funding to address the issues of to do with food for people that are suffering from the TB disease. We want the members of parliament to discuss on how best to expand the prisons in Malawi. We also want members of parliament to ensure that prisoners with TB are staying well in our prison facilities, to ensure that they get cured to these diseases.
In the arts, we meet singer-songwriter Anita Denga, who says is determined to wear the big shoes left by such greats as Maria Chidzanja Nkoma. But has she got what it takes?
Anita is an African woman who is really not that local. I wouldn't really say I'm local because I was not raised in the village. I grew up in the town, but then I grew up with people with values, teaching me good values, teaching me about traditions and everything. So yeah, she's just a simple African lady who loves music.
She has come way from far, has had to deal with stage fright, and finally, now she can be counted on Malawi's lean list of female musicians. In fact, it's just a matter of time before Anita Denga hits it big in the music circles. She has the voice and determination to go far. Anita is a young musician on a big mission to redefine Malawi's music, more so where female artists are concerned. Anita loves all types of music, but it is the traditional beat that gets her off her feet, a genre she's keen to be identified by. While many of her peers are into urban music, Anita is going traditional, hoping to fill into the shoes of such local greats as the likes of late Maria Chidzanja Nkoma.
In the past, I could hear that we had queens in music, which was the Maria Chidzanja Nkomas and the others, and I don't want their legacy to fade. Because these days we're having a lot of ladies, yes, most of them are into the urban music. They are copying the amapiano styles, bringing them into here. But then I still want to keep the old legacy going. Of course, we might have this new thingy, as you know, as in Yamadafe, but then, yeah. Still, Malawi is Malawi, and for Malawi to be there, we had those people back then who were standing up to bring Malawi on the map. So I want to bring all that to Kalidwe back into our new days.
Malawi's traditional music is as diverse as its ethnic mix. You talk of Chioda, Manganje, Chopa, Ingoma, Gulewamkulu, Mampenenga, Vimbuza, Mbotosia, and several others. This far, anything goes, as Anita is yet to choose her beloved spot.
When we talk about a Malawian, we're not talking about just the Vimbuza, but then we're supposed to put the Vimbuza there and the belly and everything together. If you take all the traditions together and put them into one thing, I'm sure it would bring out something nice, something beautiful, and something more shining, more like gold, even more of the gold just from the Malawian all dancers together.
So that was Agama after changing his behaviors because of money. But though when I met him, he had nothing.
So far, Anita's songs are about her everyday experiences. In fact, they reveal a person who's been heartbroken, lyrics of a crying and dejected person. Stories, she says, are too common to be ignored by a musician like her.
It is what is happening these days. Everywhere you go, you find a lot of ladies, you know, doing things which they were not supposed to do. And if you had to ask them, they'll tell you because they're heartbroken. You go places, you go around, you find men having more than 2 wives. And if you are really to look around or to ask around, you find out that even the ladies, they don't even know that we are 3 on the row. They're always thinking that they're the only ones they have, whilst no. So I'll not only tackle, the African dancers, the Watis are there, but then we also have problems, We have girls in the houses who are being raped every day, either with their uncles, either with their fathers, who cannot come out to tell the people. Why? Because they're afraid. What will the people say? What will they think about me? What will they talk about my family after hearing my story? You know, there are a lot of things happening out there which you don't know about. So, with the type of life that we are living now, with what is happening, with the way people have lost their ways, I am heartbroken and will sometimes be singing for those who cannot come out to sing on their own. I want to be their voice. I want to be a voice to that lady. I want to be a voice to that girl who cannot stand on her own and tell you her problems. She can come to me and narrate her story. I can turn her story into a song that will touch your heart. And if you were that kind of person, maybe might change through my song. You never know.
As with most artists, her music journey got off at a tender age in church. Over the years, she's performed for Chreaa, a children's project, and backed veteran musician Ben Mankamba. She has also acted in a movie entitled Baba's Song and performed at festivals including Hangout and Sand Festival, mostly doing covers. The 25-year-old, who says is inspired by Chreaa, is all set to make a name as a singer-songwriter.
Denga means heaven, actually, and my music will grow. I can see myself flying above the heavens themselves, flying to the sky should be the limit. No, I think it can even go further than that. As long as what I'm doing will be helpful, not just to me, but even those people who are in need of other things. I wish and pray that I go beyond the sky, as long as Anita and the Malawian flag will be going as high as it can, as far as the whole world should see that even Malawi is a small country on that big map. We can also see it from far, even here in Asia. I think there's a Malawian flag waving somewhere there, and I want to be the one holding it, trying to show them that, hey, don't forget we have Malawi here.
Well, on that note, we end this edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Jane Gogodas. Thanks that you could join us, and join us again next week. Bye for now.